In a city that walked on the tips of its fingers and adorned itself with silence instead of jewels, a boy was born who measured his breaths as he measured his watch, precisely and without the clamor of gowns. The dresses were wide, but life was narrow, and words were few, but what went unspoken was the most important. Welcome to the Victorian era, when dignity was found in bowing and the heart was hidden behind a silk glove. At 6 o'clock on a cold winter morning in 1850, London began to wake, not to the sound of birds, but to the clatter of iron wheels rolling over cobblestone streets and to hurried footsteps sinking into the fog. The sun had not yet appeared, but the city opened as slowly and quietly as a heavy theater curtain, though not without a faint hum. A milkman called out loudly in the narrow alleys, carrying his load on a small wooden cart pulled by his hands. He stopped at each door, pouring milk into glass bottles, and tapped gently. From an upper floor, a woman opened her window slightly, inhaled the air that felt like cold water, then returned behind the curtain to wake her 3 daughters. The sewing appointment would not wait. On another street, the city cleaning cart emerged, pushed by hands carrying ashes, coal, and the heavy smells of the previous night. London did not sleep clean. It washed itself at the start of every morning. Workers in thick jackets and long boots swept the dirt and swallowed the dust without complaint. No one heard them, no one thanked them, but they were part of the rhythm of the city, like the hands of a clock. At the bridge, a man in dark clothes lit a gas lamp before it went out completely. The lamps illuminated the night and dimmed with the day, extinguished by a long pole. Then he continued on to another district whose name no one knew, but he passed there every morning, and the city entrusted him with this sacred task. A small bell rang at the bakery door. The bakers had started hours earlier, and the hot loaves had just come out of the stone oven. The air on this street carried the scent of burnt wheat, butter, and the palms of some children. Cockroaches scuttled past, stopping in front of the glass display, admiring the loaves as if they were forgotten treasures. Another cart passed, closed and wrapped in coarse cloth, carrying things unseen by passers-by, perhaps vegetables, perhaps washed clothes, perhaps the secrets of a household that opened its doors only at noon. In Victorian London, no one asked too much, and no one revealed much. In the wealthy districts, windows opened inward, curtains moved softly, and the maids began covering tables with white cloths, polishing candlesticks, and placing the newspapers assigned to each gentleman of the household. Everything was measured precisely, even the placement of the teaspoon. In contrast, in the homes of the poor, damp blankets were pulled from bodies, water was heated over a nearly flaming fire, and dry bread was divided among family members before the father left for the factory. The streets were still soft with fog. The city tried to hide its face a little before the sun appeared. Doors opened one by one, carriages increased, and the sounds rose, not with shouting but like an orchestra, gradually introducing one note after another. And so, without anyone noticing, London woke up. Yet beneath this seemingly solid surface, there was another world invisible from windows, unheard in newspapers, a world living in basements where light did not reach and speech was forbidden. And there our story begins. In the basements of Victorian London homes, the sun did not shine. Light did not reach there, neither through windows nor conversation. It was a world of its own, inhabited by soft footsteps, short whispers, and commands obeyed without discussion. The servants' day began before dawn, when the city was still asleep, and when no one heard the sound of cold water poured into the metal basin. He washed his face quickly, dressed in dark clothes, combed his hair hastily. No time for yawning, no time for thought. Tasks were divided as breaths were divided. Every servant knew their place, and every maid knew her silence. The cook began preparing breakfast before the family opened their eyes. Another maid cleaned the stove, arranged the spoons in their designated drawer, and filled the kettle. The young boy working in the stables swept the straw and prepared the horse for the master's carriage. No one asked anyone's name. Titles were enough. The cook was the mistress, the boy the servant, as if they were tools rather than humans. In the long underground corridor, a row of shoes shone every morning. Shoes spoke volumes in elite homes. There was no room for error. Every shoe had to shine as if new, even if unworn for days. Clothes were steamed and hung according to the order of the rooms. The lower rooms were small, with cold stone walls and narrow beds only suitable for intermittent sleep. No fireplaces, no windows with a view. The servants' dining room was silent. They sat hastily, ate leftovers from the upper floor, then returned to work as if nothing had happened. Rules were strict. A maid could not speak to a family member unless asked. She could not ascend to the second floor without permission. Footprints on the white carpet could result in punishment, even dismissal or loss of wages. Every move had to be calculated, every breath quiet. Even relationships among servants were governed by silence. Close contact was discouraged. There was no time for friendship. Everyone was wary, afraid of mistakes. Some hid letters from family in small wooden drawers, reading them secretly by candlelight before returning them as if they had never existed. Yet amid this iron system, shy human moments appeared. The maid placed a small flower on the breakfast table, unbidden. The cook slid an extra piece of bread to the boy unnoticed by the lady, and eyes sometimes met for a fleeting moment before returning to the floor. Servants were the hidden backbone of Victorian homes. They kept everything clean, shining, and still, but lived in the shadows, unseen, unwritten about, always behind closed doors. If morality came from above, who made the rules and who watched whom? In Victorian England, morality was not always internal. It was watched from the outside. Neighbors observed, relatives whispered, servants passed news, and at parties, eyes were stricter than laws. Those who misbehaved lost invitations, respect, and perhaps marriage prospects. One famous example was the lady's walk in the street. Walk too fast, and she was deemed mannish. Too slow, and she was seeking attention. She had to move as if not moving, stir suspicion even in a glance. A long look could be interpreted as an invitation, a fleeting one as rudeness. A smile was a dangerous weapon. It was not easy to smile without being misunderstood. Books taught the upper class how to speak, sit, and even show grief at funerals. Yes, grief had a method. No screaming, no open tears. Everything calculated, polite, and neat. Clothing was part of this system. A woman could not show her ankles. A man could not remove his hat out of place. Even in poor neighborhoods, people copied the aristocrats' manners, striving to appear polite, even if hungry. Respect, it was said, was earned through behavior, not money. But behind the rigid shell, many suffocated, unable to be themselves, hiding sadness, laughter, or love. With so many rules, breaking them was tempting, but the cost was high. How did children live amid this social silence? Childhood was not what we know today, full of laughter, play, or bedtime stories. It was a waiting room for adulthood, poverty, or work. Children had to learn silence, proper sitting, avoiding disturbance, as crying marked weakness and excessive play was seen as bad manners. Children were raised behind closed doors, in rooms far from guests, under strict governesses who forbade spontaneous hugs or excessive joy. They learned reading before neck control and perfected silence before being allowed to speak. Governesses were second mothers, or sometimes the only mother the child saw all day. Children could not interrupt adults, speak without asking, or break rules in eating, walking, or even laughing. Dirtied clothes or sounds in the hallways were unacceptable. They were always told, "Behave as if invisible." In poor neighborhoods, there was no time to teach manners. Children worked as soon as they could carry coal or push a small cart. By ages 7 or 8, many were already in mines or factories, handling massive machines in sunlight-deprived, endlessly noisy places. In mines, children crawled through narrow tunnels, carrying sacks of coal on small backs, returning home blackened. They spoke little, as fatigue stole the ability to talk. In factories, their small fingers fixed pieces unreachable by adults, often losing a finger in sudden accidents. The assembly line never stopped. There were no laws to protect them. The law favored factories, and society justified all this with the phrase, "Work teaches discipline." Yet, despite the harshness, children invented private moments, playing with stones on the way home, stealing a laugh inside an empty cardboard box, or listening to another child's story of a city they never saw. They created hope from a fleeting day, kept under a pillow if found. Childhood was measured by patience, not years. Every child held a small elder inside, waiting to grow or forget. Elsewhere, tea was poured quietly, appearances carefully arranged, social rituals performed as a never-ending play. Tea was not mere drink, but a stage to display refinement, discipline, and class. A small cup of tea conveyed what books could not, who you were, and where you stood. Rituals began at 4 p.m. as the sun tilted and golden light filtered into velvety salons of affluent homes. Lace cloths were spread over heavy wooden tables, fine Chinese porcelain trays arranged, and tea poured from a grand pot by a gloved hand. Ladies sat in rows, backs straight, eyes watching who was late, who laughed too much. Conversation revolved around charity, marriage news, perhaps new hat designs. No politics, no complaints. Everything was light, measured. Even the air seemed to obey instructions before moving. Cakes had their etiquette. Not eaten before serving the most important guest, never held directly by hand, butter spread with a knife, jam placed subtly. Every detail communicated something, even without words. Middle-class families tried to mimic these rituals with modest means. A small table by the window, a tin teapot, cracked ceramic cups. The mother ensured tea was ready even if there was no sugar, for appearance mattered more than taste. In workers' alleys, tea came after work, a brief rest, a moment to light the stove, gather in silence around one cup, shared among children. No salon, no fine china, but a warm silence like respect, even in fatigue. Newspapers detailed elegant tea service, seasonal sweets, and imported teapots. Girls were taught to lift fingers while holding cups and display modesty from the first sip. Tea was not the goal. It was a tool to show refinement, distinction, and belonging to a class that mastered time and filled moments with beautiful silence. It was said that to know a woman, observe how she prepares tea. Yet, women bore most of the burden, from preparing the table to performing delicacy, arranging flowers, hiding fatigue behind a soft smile. Behind shiny fabrics and fine cups, many women felt trapped in a silk cage, smiling, being examples of elegance even as their spirits broke inside. To be a lady in the Victorian era meant duty. The household was no place for rest, but a daily stage of silent performance. Women were taught to be soft shadows, voices low, presence restrained, rules unbroken, even when suffocating. Their day began in front of mirrors, ensuring expressions betrayed nothing unseemly. Hair arranged, skin pale. The noble woman did not tan. Corsets tightened, skirts lifted slightly, but ankles remained hidden. Gloves worn even in heat. Walking swiftly, sitting freely, laughing loudly were forbidden. Speech had to be gentle, movements graceful, modesty constant. In salons, women spoke of flowers or rain, or the last dinner party. Science or politics were off limits. Even secret readings under bed covers were a dangerous luxury. Unmarried girls were to remain pure, composed, ready to reflect the desires of the man who might court them. Skills like music, embroidery, and poetry were cultivated not for interest, but to please society. Aging unmarried drew critical glances. Education was limited. Girls learned arithmetic only to manage expenses, read literature to refine taste, and if diaries were kept, feelings hidden, wishes unrecorded. Some women quietly defied rules, reading philosophy at night, sewing secret love letters, letting longing pass in hidden smiles. Freedom occasionally passed lightly, like a breeze, but never lasted. This was not exclusive to the wealthy. Even middle-class mothers taught daughters not to argue, refuse, or dream excessively. Life was built on patience and silence. Outside salons, factories smoked, iron sang, rain tasted of coal. Cities changed. Air carried the omen of a new age. By mid-19th century, London was no longer a silent city walking on tiptoe. It had become a massive being, breathing coal, consuming time, forging iron. The Industrial Revolution reshaped the city from top to fog. Air was no longer clean. Smoke poured from chimneys. The city burned slowly, yet fed its own fire. Ash rose from apartments, smells from drains, machinery screamed. London became loud, not just in sound, but shape, smell, color. Day was no longer white, but ashy, heavy, saturated with coal dust. Clothes dirtied quickly. Buildings appeared dull. Windows closed more than they opened. Even rain was black, carrying smoke residues across the streets. The city wept in a new color. In factories, gears turned without pause. Workers arrived at dawn, left only when the sun disappeared. No rest, no place for complaint. Machines overpowered all. Women worked alongside men in merciless, noisy, unclean environments. Streets bustled with carts carrying coal, men pushing wooden carts loaded with iron, children running with messages or selling newspapers. Everything moved, everything produced. Even fatigue seemed part of the city's new system. Urban expansion followed industrial revolution. Buildings rose, chimneys tall, iron bridges, train tunnels splitting the earth. Time had a new, frantic, suffocating rhythm. But with progress came loss. Trees cut, gardens squeezed, natural sounds vanished. Birds' songs replaced by train whistles, flowers replaced by burning fuel. Yet eyes sparkled behind soot, signaling change. Some saw salvation from poverty, others foresaw long alienation. No one stopped the wheel. The city moved forward, dragging itself and its people. Amid progress, bodies tired, disease spread, treatments experimented with insufficient knowledge, anesthesia rare. Victorian medicine lagged behind London's growth. Surgeons worked without hygiene, instruments reused, germs unseen but deadly. Doctors in black coats carried shining, intimidating tools. Operations were public, performed without reliable anesthesia. Patients restrained, often only screaming to dull pain. Some progress occurred. Cleanliness reduced deaths, sterilizing instruments helped, but convincing all was difficult. In poor districts, doctors were itinerant, rooms cramped, remedies guessed. Herbal remedies and luck were all many had. Midwives filled gaps left by formal medicine, experienced, warm-handed, passing knowledge generationally. Certain diseases carried fear and shame, such as tuberculosis or madness. Patients were isolated, treated as guilty rather than sick. Medicine was harsh but learning. By the late 19th century, germs were discovered, microscopes introduced. Knowledge promised understanding, not only cure. In a time when pain tested patience, love was written in scented letters hidden in books, unsigned. Love was not light or simple. Emotions were suffocated under rules, enclosed in formalities, nurtured like glass house plants. A man could not declare love openly. He had to know her name via a go-between, await a supervised meeting, write letters, avoid bold words. Meetings were in public gardens, walking one step apart, speaking of weather or books. They could not sit together, laugh aloud. Love was a ritual with boundaries, signs, prohibitions. Women, even if in love, appeared hesitant, modest, distant. Expressing feelings openly risked being judged ill-bred. Love was earned with intent, uprightness, and status. Men requested a girl's hand from parents, not her, showing income, reputation, and plans. Engagement was a long series of formal visits, closely monitored. Yet love found ways. Lingering glances at dinner tables, flowers left on window sills. Love was not rare, only silent. In poorer classes, love differed but was rarely easier. Marriages often out of necessity, feelings condensed to "we will live and adapt." Yet, amid all rules, lovers wrote secret poems, women kept letters in sewing boxes, husbands whispered words unheard. The city, with all its silent love, revealed another face at night. After sunset, behind closed salon doors, in dark alley corners, in streets inaccessible to carts, lost souls sought warmth, food, or escape, even at a price. Brothels spread like stalls, some small, windowless, some luxurious as hotels. Women there were known by aliases, some fled hunger, others forced into it. Choices were few, submission or street, often the latter being the end. Pickpocketing and small thefts flourished. Some crimes were left unsolved to avoid scandal. Tricksters dressed as doctors, priests, lawyers, selling false promises, magic cures, jobs, love in a perfume bottle. Strangely, nightlife was sometimes more honest than day. No pretenses, no masks. Wounds were visible, hearts expressed themselves even if broken. These worlds were not far from palaces, but in neighboring streets, behind walls. Victorian night was not merely darkness. It revealed what daylight hid, reminding that behind every lit salon was an untold shadow. At the top of this era, a woman watched from afar. She rarely smiled, rarely showed feeling, yet ruled an empire, shaping an entire era. In 1837, Victoria was 13, unknown outside the palace. When crowned Queen of Great Britain, she could not know her name would define a century, her image a symbol of the era and silence. From the first moment, she was different. Small, serious, cautious, observing without hesitation, rarely smiling or speaking unnecessarily, learning quickly, hiding emotions like valuable porcelain in royal drawers. Victoria ruled for over 60 years, the longest reign for a British queen to that date. Under her, the empire expanded from Canada to India, Africa to Australia. Her image adorned schools, offices, streets, official ceremonies. Behind the throne, she combined severity and sorrow. She loved Prince Albert deeply. When he died after 17 years of marriage, she never recovered. She wore black for the rest of her life, reduced public appearances, withdrawing her heart from the throne into absence, earning the title, the Mourning Widow. Yet she never relinquished power. She monitored state affairs, wrote lengthy letters to prime ministers, demanded detailed reports. She ruled with intellect, not blood, commanding respect silently. Opinions were divided. Some saw her cold, distant. Others saw her as a protective grandmother figure. She was not close to the people like some monarchs, yet she was not absent either. Present like a mountain, immovable, her shadow never gone. Mourning became a long duty, black clothing a symbol of sobriety. Women learned seriousness from her, men feared her firmness. Even political parties considered her stance, though she never openly endorsed anyone. She wrote thousands of pages in her diaries, but we do not precisely know her true feelings. Her face rarely smiled. Her official portraits lacked warmth. Yet she loved her children, corresponded with her grandchildren, and held the sick grandchild's hand as a mother would. When Queen Victoria died on January 22nd, 1901, people mourned not just a woman, but an entire era. Her death marked the end of a time. London, which had breathed coal and lived by tradition, coughed for the first time, deciding to breathe fresh air. Palaces did not fall, but something in the spirit changed. Black curtains lifted slowly, and streets accustomed to silence began to hear a different rhythm. Less strict, more curious. Yet the legacy of that era did not vanish. It seeped into details, the way we perceive morality, family, propriety. Even today, when we stand straight before strangers, lower our voice in public, we are reenacting those old shadows unknowingly. The clothing we wear for occasions, the phrases in formal letters, even the design of some houses and gardens carry the imprint of a time when the Queen watched without smiling, and society moved like a clock that knew no chaos. Victorian manners still live among us. Dickens' novels, Tennyson's poetry, Jane Austen's letters, all still read, quoted, translated anew. Today, when we look at her stern portraits or read about fog-laden London streets, we do so out of curiosity, out of longing for a time when life was slow, elevated, constrained, yet filled with secrets. The fog has gone, yes, but its trace remains on the windows, and perhaps every time we gently close a door, arrange our clothes before leaving, or whisper instead of shouting, we honor that era from afar, unknowingly. And so the story ends, but the echo of the Victorian age still resonates.